Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello listeners, and welcome to part 2 of my interview with Dee. If you haven't listened yet to part 1, it might be worth going back and having a quick listen of this episode. But without further ado, here is the conclusion of our interview. And you said that you were in the Air Force when you joined that Mormon movement.
Yes.
So what was your role within the Air Force?
So I was, my role was to maintain the radio equipment that kept aircraft and some missiles in communication with ground control.
Okay, and are these kind of transferable skills that you used when you hosted your radio show?
I had been interested in electronics long before I went in the Air Force. When I was in high school, I was actually maintaining the school's audiovisual equipment.
Okay.
So that was something that was every single birthday, every single Christmas, I got some sort of electronics kit. So I was building radios before, probably when I was in grade school, maybe 7 or 8 years old, I built my first radio.
Wow. And is that something you're still interested in today?
Somewhat. That's what I'm doing for work right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back and talk a little bit more about your parents. So when you lived in this house and you were living under these strict rules, you decided at some point to leave. Did your brothers stick around? Are they more in touch with your parents than you are?
2 of my brothers are, and it wasn't so much a decision to leave. What wound up happening was in my senior year in high school, I wanted to go to college, and I was going to I had an uncle who had offered to pay for college for me. And my parents would not let that happen.
Okay.
So instead, in my senior year, they arranged a chat with a neighbor who was a U.S. Army recruiter. And I realized at one point that my parents had told him that I didn't want to be a boy. Because when some of the paperwork had to be filled out, this person said, well, answer these questions as if you want to be a boy.
Right.
So that to me was like probably one of the worst violations of all, was my parents telling this to a neighbor. So they were trying to get me into the military because they were thinking that could masculinize me.
And also take the opportunity of going to college away from you as well.
Right. Yeah.
What were you planning to study in college?
I think, so if I would have gone in, I probably would have started out studying electronics, but I think if I would have seen a little bit more of what was available, that might have changed. Okay. I know that eventually I started taking some college courses just to improve my career, and I had one of my psychology classes, I had an instructor really pushing me to study psychology, and that could have happened. I could have gone into psychology, music therapy, or a number of different things. It's just the world was not open to me at that point.
Do you think? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, that's okay. I just had one career that had been kind of pushed on me since I was 7 years old.
And that was church related?
No, electronics.
Electronics, okay.
Yeah, if I wasn't going to be a priest, I was going to do the military.
And do you think your parents' decision to sign you up to the military had something to do with the money that was offered from your uncle?
I think they would not accept anything like that. I think yeah.
And you mentioned that two of your brothers are still in touch with your parents regularly?
Yep, I've got one brother that's living with them, he and his wife, and yeah.
And they all attend the church together?
Yep.
So going back to talk about your parents a little bit more, we went through Stephen Hassan's bite model, and you could apply almost every single point from that model to some type of control that your parents used within the house towards you and your brothers. Can you give us sort of like an average day in your house of kind of how meals were, bedtime routines, anything that might shed some more light on some of these?
So most of what I know about meals is I heard from my brother. I don't have that much memory. So meals were kind of a competition time. So occasionally my mother would just throw a pot of food on the table and everybody grabbed what they could. And if you were the last one to the table, you probably had little to eat. On the other hand, there was strict punishment if you didn't eat everything that you took.
Right, so if you took too much food and couldn't finish it, there might be the leather strop.
Yep.
And is that one type of thing in the house that might result in discipline?
Yeah, that could. Other things would be if you said something they didn't like. And occasionally it went beyond the leather strop to like a physical beating or something too. Complaining too much. Crying when they thought you shouldn't be crying. All sorts of things could lead to it. If they thought you were malingering, that would.
So just sounds like pretty much anything at all.
Pretty much.
And
the worst one was when you did something wrong and my father would start counting. And whatever number he got to, that was how many times you were going to get hit. You had to go get the strap that he was going to use to hit you. And he'd just start counting until you got back with that, and that's how many hits you'd get with it.
That's absolutely terrifying. Do you think that there were any other families within your congregation that were operating this way?
So I know one of the students in, I think this was 6th or 7th grade. So when I went to the school, it was mostly nuns who were teaching. And this one student called the teacher a bitch or said something like that. So she walked up to him and just did a backhand right across his face, and his nose was bleeding. And,
oh my goodness.
And he said, well, my father's a cop and he's going to come here and he's going to arrest you. Well, the next day his father comes in and said, what happened? And the teacher said, he called me a bitch and I hit him. And his father said, next time, hit him harder.
Oh my goodness. I don't think that would be allowed to happen today. You'd hope not anyway.
Yeah, in our school, every parent signed a letter authorizing the school to use physical forms of discipline.
So that kind of leads me to believe that parents were also using those types of disciplines in their own houses.
I don't think it was universal. And I think even if they were using forms of discipline, that obviously some parents were much worse than others. And it was recently at an uncle's funeral, my brother was talking to one of our neighbors, and we were known as that family. So like if my mother was looking for us and yelling for us to come in the house.
How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1, go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2, collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3, play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4, unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
That was kind of okay. It was time to get home, but they knew that if our father was out there yelling for us, that someone was going to get beat.
Right. Okay. So there sounds as though there was more abuse going on in your household than in others.
Than in most others. I'm not going to say that we were the absolute worst. I have no way to know that.
Right.
But
yeah.
ours was definitely one that was known for, I mean, there was one time where my father assaulted a friend of mine for saying something that he didn't like, and my father had his hand at his throat with this person up against a wall, and this kid was much larger than my father was, and he was terrified.
So people were scared of your father.
They didn't want to see him angry, no. Although in the church, that was kind of different because he was very, very respected in the church.
Right, okay.
Still, yeah.
And did your parents or were you and your siblings ever expected to help raise money for the church?
That did happen in the church, yes.
Okay.
I remember one time that it really, really bothered me. And at this point I was older, but there were at least a few fundraisers per year. There were the ones where, like during Easter, you would fast and you take the money that would have gone to food and you put that in an offering to the church and things like that. Those were fairly ordinary.
Right.
There was always the Catholic Charities appeal and that sort of thing. But the one that bothered me was after I was an adult, the church had a fundraising campaign, and they hired this outside consultant to teach us how to do fundraising. And it just felt really uncomfortable pressuring people to pretty much give more than they could afford.
Right.
And that really bothered me. But, you know, the consultant was there. Oh, people want to give. They're just looking for a reason to give. And they taught us how to, like, have them go through their finances and figure out where they could take money that they could send to the church. And obviously the consultant was getting paid some percentage of the funds that were raised. So, you know, they had no problem asking people for more money than they could afford because it's all about the money.
And you mentioned that there was another experience that made you feel uncomfortable as well, and that was around the rhythmic prayer sessions that you were involved with. So
this was during the charismatic renewal, and they were having a parish retreat. And as part of this is all the Pentecostal kind of influence. That is all about being baptized in the Holy Spirit, and evidence of that evidence that you're baptized in the Holy Spirit is speaking in tongues and things like that. But there is this one song called the Adoramus Te Domine, which is Latin for I love you, God. And actually, you know what? I'm going to see if I can, if you don't mind, I'll grab my guitar and see if I can.
Yeah, I would absolutely love that. That would be awesome.
My voice is a little crunchy in the morning, but I will see if I can do it.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Adoramus te Domine. Adoramus te Domine. So you do that for 15 or 20 minutes, and you have people building harmonies all around it.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm sorry about my voice. It's a little bit.
No, it sounded lovely.
But
so you would repeat that over and over and over, and that would contribute towards the meditation state of the group.
And just adding layers and layers and layers of harmony, and the music swelling and ebbing. And it becomes very hypnotic.
And you felt unsure being involved in something that was being used to.
Yeah, it really hit me that one day that, you know, the suggestions beforehand and then the music, and I think a lot of similar things happen with altar calls and things like that, where they play that kind of soft, very emotional, evocative kind of music.
To kind of encourage the group to enter a particular state of mind.
Right. And then you're told, once again, similar to what the Mormons were doing with, you know, if you go into your quiet place and you read these scriptures, you're going to feel something, and it's the Holy Spirit testifying to you. In this instance, it's, okay, we're going to do this period of music that could last 15 or 20 minutes or more. And people are told that what they're feeling is the Holy Spirit. And they're not told that what they're feeling is a hypnotic state induced with this repetitive music like a mantra. And that's what they're feeling.
Right, okay. And you spoke about that being at a retreat that you attended. When you were in your church, when you were younger, were there any kind of camps or retreats that you took part in?
There were. There were some, especially for the music ministry. There were also, these were of a very different nature, and that would be when this one sexually abusive priest would take the altar servers to his camp, but that was very different.
Did you ever attend one of his camps?
Oh yeah, our family was there often.
And were church members aware of his actions?
I don't think they were at the time. Yeah, I'm not sure. There were at least 3 sexually abusive priests in my life.
And when you spoke to your parents about this, is this another example of something that wouldn't be believed by them?
I know it wouldn't be believed. I do not remember talking to them about it.
Right.
I've got some serious gaps. One thing I know for certain is that every one of my parents' children tried suicide at least once.
Oh my goodness.
And at one point we had this family meeting with a therapist, and This was after a brother's attempt, and they just felt that it was a waste of time, that all we were doing was trying to accuse them of bad things, and they were done. So the fact that one of their children tried to kill themselves was not sufficient cause for them to look at their past, look at their relationship with the church or whatever.
Yeah, that's an extreme example of the narcissism that we've talked about with your parents, when a child is so distraught and feels like they have no other option other than to take their own life, and your parents will sit there and say, this is an attack on me.
Yep. But they would also defend the priests. I know of another case where this would have been a fourth priest. I don't think he did anything to me or my brothers, but this one woman had accused him of fondling her some years ago. It might have been like 20 or 30 years before.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And he was a friend of their family as well as a friend of my parents.
Right.
And what made it clear to me that this was legitimate was, he goes, no, I was just at a party with her parents and I brushed up against her.
Okay.
So how do you remember such a minor incident like that happened 30 years prior? And, you know, can this woman ever prove what happened? No. But my parents were staunch defenders of this person.
So,
and staunch defenders of everybody else who was sexually abusive in that church, even after the church itself has come out and said, yes, this happened.
when people are coming forward and giving testimonies about their abuse, if they have such strong character witnesses, it would be so difficult for these people to see justice, I guess, right, against anybody. That's horrible. I mean, you also mentioned about how you would have to go to confessionals with these priests, mm-hmm, and your parents would they would observe how many prayers you had to say afterwards to kind of guess the level of sin that you'd committed.
That was pretty common. It was kind of when we were growing up and we're in church and it's like a confessional service. I guess that was kind of like the thing. Oh, wow, that person's kneeling for a long time. They must have done something really bad.
So do you think there was a level of shaming within your church?
There was a lot of judgment. I think just knowing the number of sins knowing the number of prayers that a person is saying, you still don't have an idea of what that person might have done. But the shaming would happen more like in the case of a divorce, or if someone's husband died and they got married again too soon.
Right. It's just interesting because I released an episode yesterday where I spoke to another lady named Tori, and she just said that when she was growing up, shame was just such a huge theme in her childhood. And she also said that when she'd listened to other people's survivor stories from other movements and sects, that it also seemed to be common in those movements too. So I just wanted to ask if you'd ever experienced this.
So I think in Catholicism, it's a bit different. There's this old joke about a child who grew up in a family and their mother was Jewish and their father was Catholic, so they grew up with the guilt and the guilt. But yeah, in Catholicism, and I think this is true in much of Christianity, you see this among many Christian athletes. You know, they work hard to win this race, and I've got to give the glory to God because this is not what I did. In the Catholic Church, anything that you do that's bad, that's your fault.
Right.
Anything that you can do that's good, that's because of God.
Right. Okay. And
so yeah.
Was there ever any recruitment literature for your church, or were you ever involved in trying to get new members for the congregation?
I wasn't personally. This is kind of interesting. There's a lot of recruitment going on in third world countries because the church knows that it can gain more of a foothold there. I think it's a little bit different when you have a church that already has more than 1 billion members. So recruitment looks kind of different. So there's a whole lot of effort on retention.
Right.
And there is this whole welcome home movement where they're trying to attract ex-Catholics
right
to come back to the fold. There is still, if you're getting married and you want to be married in the church, then you have to marry, that person. There's a huge impetus for them to convert.
Okay.
And there are a lot of campaigns going on college campuses now. So there's a whole Catholic movement there. So there is recruitment. More, what I was doing in the church was more involved in like education, and I worked on a number of retreats, either for high school students, or I worked on a couple for college students, and I guess faith development or whatever. So there would be retreats, getting children ready for confirmation, letting them understand, okay, here are the implications of this sacrament. So in Catholicism, confirmation is where you're anointed by a bishop, and that is historically where you would receive the gifts of the Spirit. But in the charismatic movement, that's not a real baptism in the Holy Spirit. You've got to have the real baptism in the Holy Spirit where you learn how to speak tongues and get the gift of prophecy and things like that. So I know there have been people in the Catholic Church, among the bishops and things, who were actually fearful of the charismatic movement. But that's been given a kind of a blessing by the Pope as well. So that's the biggest thing about Catholicism, is that there is not one single way to be Catholic. And I think that's what leads to so many different like smaller cults within the church. So while the church itself as a whole may not be classified as a single cult, it gives a lot of room for smaller cults to evolve inside the church.
I suppose if me and you were devout Catholics practicing and we had different views on how to interpret scripture, you might go away and proselytize to some people your version. I would go away and do the same. And then before you know it, we formed two denominations that are practicing essentially the same religion, but with different structures.
If you look at the Catholic Church as a whole, you have you have the Roman Catholic Church, but there's also this thing, the Maronite Church. So the Maronites are part of the Roman Catholic Church, but their liturgy looks fairly different. They still have prayers in Aramaic. So the Maronite Church developed in Africa. I guess historically that was founded by Peter, where the larger Catholic Church where the Church of Rome was founded by Paul, and they each had their own views, but they still fall under the Pope. You have the Eastern Orthodox Church, which used to be part of the Catholic Church. They broke away. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, there isn't an iota of difference.
I have not, I don't think.
Okay, well, if you ever hear that, what that was about was the split was on two words, homoousios and homoiousios. And they were talking, basically it was a disagreement of whether Jesus and the Father were of the same substance, or whether Jesus came out of, it was based on what was the nature of Christ. Was he God or was he of God? And that caused one of the largest schisms in the Catholic Church, where, it separated the Eastern Church and the Western Church. So you can have disagreements like that where it actually causes a break in the church, or you can have different things that are both sanctioned by the church that the church just sees as different ways of worship. So you can have the monasteries like my aunt's, where people believe in a life of prayer and poverty and chastity, and that's all they do. You can have other groups who think that, okay, it's our job to teach. So that was like a different order called the School Sisters of Notre Dame. You can have ascetic orders like Opus Dei, where they believe in some of the similar things that my aunt did, where they believe that, physical suffering is somehow efficacious to salvation. There are still groups that the church will actually disavow, who still think that the Latin Mass is the only authentic way to celebrate the Mass and things like that. So there are a lot of things going on just inside the Catholic Church because of people's different ways of interpreting Scripture and what they think the church should be. You have the Catholic League, which is virulently anti-gay, anti-LGBT. So,
is that that's one of the types of movements where you'd find the pray the gay away type of conversion therapy?
I think they would support that. Yeah.
And within your church specifically, were you ever asked to pick a new name?
So that's an interesting part of confirmation that I think a lot of people don't put as much stock in as they used to. But when I grew up, I remember having one whole class about how to choose a name for your confirmation. That usually came about where it was more important for people who had converted to the church who might not have had a name that was a Christian name. So where I grew up with a name that was already Christian, it wasn't, it was the name of a saint. It wasn't super important for me to pick another name, but I know some people who did. And that, again, that's done on your confirmation. We had this one nun who was really proud of one of her favorite saints, Saint Polycarp. And I don't remember if she actually took that name on her confirmation or not. I know that my aunt, the one who founded that order, she took a new name when she took her vows for that. And you see that a lot in like either Catholic orders or, either confirmation or when you're taking vows into a particular order. It's common to change names.
Right. Okay. So you've spoken a little bit about things that trigger you. Is there anything that you stay away from in particular that you feel is a trigger for you?
One really kind of interesting incident that just speaks to the denial, and I don't know if it's brainwashing or whatever, but it was some years ago. I was seeing a chiropractor, and they did their round of x-rays, and this chiropractor looked at me and said, "So when did you break your hips?" And I said I hadn't. I had no memory of it.
Wow.
And he shows me the x-rays and he shows me the damage, and I still didn't believe him. And it wasn't until recently, and starting to go through therapy and things, and recognizing that, yeah, that really happened.
But you don't remember how?
I have no memory how.
Oh my
I asked
goodness.
my parents, and they said, "Oh, that never happened."
That's like you've gaslighted yourself almost to forget things.
That's what groups like this do to you, is they get you to the point where it's not real. There was, when I speak of being able to not feel pain, here's another example. I was having a nerve conductivity study done in my arm to figure out whether I had carpal tunnel syndrome or something like that. And for that process, what they will do is they will stick needles into your muscles without an anesthetic, because the anesthetic slows down your nerve conductivity, and that's what they're trying to measure. They will stick like a needle here and here, and they will excite the muscles with an electrical signal, and they measure the time. So I'm talking to this physiatrist, and I'm looking at the equipment he's using, and it's very similar to other stuff I would have used. And he's doing all of this to my arm, and finally he looks at me and said, "Doesn't this hurt?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Well, this is about the point people are normally trying to punch me in the face."
Oh my goodness.
And I know my brother's had similar things happen to him, where we just ignore injuries because that's what we do. It's, a form of dissociation. But as far as other triggers, I think there was one thing that triggered this latest mental health crisis that actually got me to the point where I can find recovery. And that was when someone who's a friend of mine had been accused of sexual assault. So he had been accused of sexual assault, and I read the account.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
It put me, that's kind of what triggered my last round of PTSD, and it's what got me in therapy this time.
Okay.
I don't think, having read the account, I don't think it was sexual assault. I think it was one of those incidents where you have a relationship with somebody that you later grow to regret.
Right.
But in any case, it was very similar to something that had happened to me. And I don't, in my case, I think the person could have been arrested because it was a supervisor at a job that I had when I was in high school.
Oh, okay.
In this other case, it was between two people who were adults at the time.
Right.
But it was just incredibly triggering. And I spent a little while after that talking to my brother, and he brought up some other memories from childhood, and everything just kind of snowballed.
Right.
So it's kind of funny because my view of triggers has changed dramatically over the past few years, just understanding my own trauma. But another trigger was watching a film about Nazi camps in South America. And just they showed the interior of one building that reminded me of the church where I grew, or this one, not the church, but it's a former church building.
Okay.
Where I was living in a Catholic community, and just the basements were very similar, and that was very triggering. Occasionally, if you see a program about cults or whatever, and people's hands are in the air, and that can be kind of triggering, and especially certain pieces of music.
So you're still learning every day. Something new could spring up that you hadn't come across. Yep. That could trigger you. Fantastic. Sorry, I realized just as you started speaking, I was like, oh, don't record. So now that you're in therapy, you're receiving therapy, you're working things through, putting things together, is therapy something that you would suggest to other cult survivors?
Therapy is definitely. I would also recommend some of the workshops by the International Cultic Studies Association. Those people are great. They're sadly, I think it's gone now. There was a group in southern Massachusetts where they had a program for people who are leaving cults, and it was actually a residential program that was a year long. And that had changed, and they were offering support groups, and that has, with COVID, that actually ended as well. But I would travel for a couple hours to get to that support group meeting. It would be nice if there was something. I think the one thing that I have learned coming out of this is that when you're first out, you have absolutely no idea how much this has affected you, especially if you grew up in a situation like that. I know that I had very, very few. I managed to get by, but it was mostly luck. But I'm still learning how to do relationships.
Okay.
I was in one relationship, and that was because someone kind of chased me. I'm terribly afraid of receiving gifts. That's really hard for me. And that actually ended at least one potential relationship, because I don't know, I think when I was given a gift, something was expected, as
right.
opposed to, this is just yours now. So gifts were horribly uncomfortable for me. So I guess I can see why a program for people coming out of cults could take a year. You've got to take time to build up your own self-esteem, to realize that, okay, as a person, I have some inherent value. You need to know how to navigate life outside of that group. If I went back to my parents' church now, it would be easy. I would be totally welcome back in the family. Everyone would look at me and say, oh, well, you did something wrong, but welcome back because you've been to confession now. You're a good Catholic. There would be still some suspicion. It's like, okay, why is this person doing this? how long would it take to be able to trust them again, that sort of thing. But at least on the surface, I would be more welcome. I wouldn't, I don't know.
So it's almost more of an uphill struggle to not be a part of something that traumatized you as a child, as opposed to be out of it and try and make things better for yourself.
So one thing that's stuck in my mind, I attended a trauma program at McLean Hospital. I don't know if you've heard of McLean, but they are a world-class teaching hospital for mental health.
Okay.
And I attended a program there last year, and there was one line it hit me so hard. And that was that love is not a sufficient reason to remain in a destructive relationship. And I heard that and I started crying, because I realized that trying to stay that connected to my family was damaging to me.
Okay.
And that's just it. And the same thing goes with churches or whatever.
Do you think you'll ever have any level of relationship or normalcy with your parents?
I don't think so. I can still love them. Yeah, it's really, really hard. It's not that I don't like them. It's that I don't like the things that they still. It is really, really complicated. The way I see them is I think they love the person they want me to be.
Okay.
I don't think they love me because they don't know me. And they don't want to know me. Even after this last time I was in hospital, I did get a phone call from them, and they're trying to accept my name now. They're trying to recognize. Okay. So they're trying to do that, but they still celebrate the people who hurt us. If I get a birthday card from them, it's always a birthday card from some religious order that says, oh yes, we, for some payment or whatever, for some donation to this order, these people are saying a mass in my name, just, trying to have God still fix me to be the person they want me to be.
Right.
There was a time when I recognized that when I hear "I love you" from my mom, it's more of a question. It's more like, please tell me that you love me.
Okay.
So, and it's also hard when you're at their house and they're talking about these priests who might have hurt you, and they're still talking fondly of them because they refuse to accept that these people actually did something to hurt their kids. Maybe part of it is they don't want to, and I know some of this happened with this priest when they were in that house. And it was kind of like, for us, it was like this person was saying, well, see, there is nothing you can do.
So do you think at this stage, even if they've been outed by the church, it's almost as if they're saving face?
You mean the priests or the parents?
The parents.
I don't think they would ever be outed by the church, because it would be hard for the church to say they did something wrong without someone testifying against them. So I probably wouldn't do that. And they are like many, many, many other Catholic families where this happened, where parents let something happen to their children. I think that was partly a manipulation by the church. I think that the priests themselves were severe narcissists, and they realized that, okay, with this kind of person, with this kind of family, I can get away with this, with whatever I want. So the parents were being manipulated by priests who had their own designs. So in some way, it's like they were complicit victims themselves.
And do you think that your parents still supporting priests who have had abuse allegations against them, proven or disproven? Do you think that if they know it's true, do you still think that they're saving face, your parents, by not acknowledging the priest's actions?
That's hard, because in one instance, I know that the church themselves have said this person did these things. It's listed on our diocesan website. The name is there. They still think of that person as a good person.
Okay.
I know people who were abused, and they think, oh, this person isn't really a pedophile, they're just gay. So they blame the whole thing on the sin of homosexuality, rather than recognizing that, no, the church was covering for priests who were abusing children. I can't speak to my parents and whether or not they would or would not support someone who they knew. I don't think they're in a position to know, even if the facts are put in front of them. It's just like any other cult member. You can show them that A, B, and C are true, and they're just not going to believe it.
Okay, yeah. I understand what you mean, yeah. So my last question to you is, would you tell me how you started your radio show? What was it called? I want to know all about it before we finish.
Okay, so the show was called Pagan FM. And when I was younger, I kind of got the feeling that if God didn't want me, then I'll find something else. And I was helping somebody, actually a friend of mine had this other show that was called Eros Radio. So he would interview sex workers. He went to the Boston Burlesque Exposition. He'd cover gay pride parades, things like that. So anything doing with sexuality. And he had me on his show once. We had been friends, and he invited to talk about being transgender. So we did that one show, and then he was telling me he was getting a promotion at the radio station. He was going to be program director. And I said, well, what's going to happen with your show? And he said, well, it's done unless you take it over. So I took over his show, went through like a small training period. One of them was really interesting. I met the station, and he said, well, I've got somebody coming in. I'd like you to interview them. I said, okay, who are they? He goes, well, find out in the interview room. What do they do? Find out in the interview room. So it was like the coldest interview I had ever done. And it was the first on-air interview that I had done. So that it was a terrible hour. It was from midnight till 4 a.m.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
on Saturday nights going into Sunday morning. And then later, as the show progressed, I realized that it really wasn't the kind of show that I wanted to do. And I was pagan at the time, and I figured, well, let's do a pagan radio show. And that was a whole interesting process, finding out how much music is out there, how many artists are out there. I had some opportunities to interview some great people. Selena Fox, Isaac Bonowitz. I interviewed Gary Andrews, who's in the UK, who I hope you have the opportunity to look up, because the videos he did with his children are absolutely brilliant. You will love them. And
The COVID videos?
Oh yeah, because you look at those videos and it's like, oh wow, what I would have given to grow up with a dad like that. So yeah, he and his wife were both into theater. They did a show, a film called Tales of Albion, and there's a couple of videos there that you might like. So I had a chance to meet people, and then I started exploring other religions on the show. I interviewed someone who was from something called the Old Catholic Church. I interviewed a Sufi imam. I got a chance to meet a number of really good musical artists, some who performed in the studio with me.
Oh, amazing.
So it was a lot of fun. And then, things happened at the radio station, and I kind of went away from that. I also had an opportunity to publish a pagan book. This one was about the 12-step programs and looking at them from a pagan perspective.
Okay.
And I'm kind of grateful that that's helped a number of people. I wouldn't write it today because I realized that all of this has been just part of a journey away from very controlling religions to maybe finding a religion that was a little bit free. But then I found that, paganism has its dark sides as well. One of the artists that I had interviewed, I later found out had also been accused of harming children. So, you kind of look at that and say, okay, what do I do with this episode? So that one episode is no longer available to the public, and I never played his music after that.
Okay.
But it's whatever religious group you're in, you're going to find people who are using it to take advantage of others. And you'll find people who are using it because they sincerely believe that this is, their relationship with the divine. And I think that's one of the things that I came to realize later on, is that every single religion that's out there is really just one person's interpretation of how to relate to something that's beyond them.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then you get to the point where, it's like you look at a dictionary and you try to decide whether the dictionary is prescriptive or descriptive. So it's like, okay, is this religion a description of my relationship to the divine, or is it now becoming a prescription that this is what you have to do to have that relationship with the divine?
Right. Okay. And before we finish, is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to go over, or anything you wanted to say?
I don't know. I think, my main point would be how my definition of what a cult is has been evolving over time. I guess no one person has kind of the answer, but I guess what I would say is that just because you're in some larger group like the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church or whichever one you happen to be in, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily safe from cultic influence because, okay, well, this larger church isn't a cult. you can have cults that can grow up in larger organizations. And that's, I think, how groups like the Reformed Latter-day Saints and others, they kind of break off because of a disagreement or some smaller group within a church. And you can have cults that don't necessarily have names. They don't have to be the Boston movement or something like that. And they don't all look the same. What matters is the amount of control that that group has over its members. Whether it's a small family group within the church that has its own unique interpretation, or whether it's a larger movement, like the entire, one of the things that really hit me was there is this book called Churches That Abuse. And it was written by a Christian, but I read through the book and I think, at the time I was thinking, well, I'm safe. And then, like within the very last 4 pages of the church, of the book, I'm finding, I know this name because I was part of that movement.
Wow. Okay.
And, yeah. So it's kind of interesting. You can definitely be in a cult and not know it.
Okay, fantastic, brilliant. Thank you so much for giving me so much insight and for sharing your experiences with me. You're so educated when it comes to religions, and you've just told me so much today that I have never heard before.
Well, I'm glad. I think I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was right and what was wrong about religion, and I just kind of feel stupid for not recognizing what my life was like until someone who had been in what I know is a legitimate cult said, yeah, we grew up the same way.
Did you go and read any books on what cults look like to kind of piece it together as well?
One of them that was kind of interesting was about Jim Jones. And I think, what is it called? I can't remember the name of it right now. But he traced the history of Jim Jones back through how the whole Azusa Street movement and everything got started. And there was this other cult in the state of Maine. What was their name? It was led by a guy named Frank Sanford. And Frank Sanford had, it's in Durham, Maine. The church is actually still there, and they had the largest Bible school in the world at the time. But what was really interesting is realizing that this guy, Frank Sanford, was preaching in a church that was literally 700 feet away from the desk where I work.
Right, okay.
And
I just looked it up here. Is it called The Kingdom? Charismatic American religious leader who attained notoriety as the founder and leader of the Kingdom.
Right. And then they still have a church up there called Shiloh Temple in Maine. Yeah. And then, he was a pastor of a church that was within walking distance of where I was working. And that kind of brought home to me the idea that, that cults are everywhere. So I started taking things a little bit more seriously. And he had a number of people die in his church.
Oh my goodness.
And the church still exists, and there's one branch of it in the state where I'm living now.
Okay.
So they can be hard to eradicate. But the one that was at the original Shiloh Temple, the pastor of that one back in the 1980s finally broke away. And that's another interesting thing about the 1980s. It was, I think, 1984 where the Catholic Church officially did away with shunning. So
right.
That existed as an actual practice in the church. But yeah, so just understanding that in the charismatic movement, that they almost had their own kind of shepherding movement in the Catholic Church. And one of the leaders of that, who I knew back from the charismatic conferences, actually apologized for his treatment of people that he was working with. So that was kind of good to hear, rather than just...
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Pretending it didn't happen, pretending it wasn't bad. But
Right. Okay. Well, my partner's just getting back with our son. It's his bath and bedtime, so I'm going to have to... I'm sure I could talk all day, honestly. You're just... Every time I say one sentence, you're giving me like a whole wealth of knowledge, and I'm really sad that I can't just carry on chatting for the rest of the day.
Hoping you think it was a worthwhile exchange, and that's all.
Absolutely. You've given me so much information, and I know it's not easy to talk about these things, but I always get people reach out to me and tell me how much it helps them because they can identify with other people's experiences. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time today, Dee.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Yes, a great evening. Thank you, Dee. Thank you so much.
We'll see you later.
See you later.
Before we finish this segment of the podcast, with Dee's permission, I wanted to read a section of the book that Dee has written. She mentioned this in our earlier conversation. To ensure her anonymity remains intact, I won't mention the name of the book, but here is the foreword. This book is a guide to the 12 steps for pagans. It is not specific to any 12-step program and is in no way designed to compete with or replace any of them. Rather, it is meant to be used in conjunction with whatever 12-step program that the reader is involved in. It may be used for retreats by those who are working such a program, or it may be used by those who do not have a problem with addiction as a basis for a truly unique spiritual experience. This book was written to fill what I see as a major void in pagan literature. While there are a number of self-help books for pagans, some even dealing with addiction and recovery, I was not able to find a single book dealing with 12-step programs from a pagan perspective. I feel this is a major omission, and I hope that the current volume at least begins to fill that void. To understand the language in this text, please note that I was trained as a Wiccan for a number of years and have studied other forms of paganism, some formally, others informally. I do not identify myself as adhering to any specific pagan tradition, though my first teacher tends to think of me as much more a Druid than a Wiccan these days. The reason this is important is because it may help the reader understand my choice of words through the text. While some are looking for an explanation of the 12 steps that avoid Christian ideas, others may think that the text may be too Wiccan, or that it may be more suited to those who identify as non-specific neo-pagan rather than Hellenics, Norse heathens, or other more specific groups. I've tried to be inclusive, but this is a difficult task, and I suspect that no one reading this with a critical eye and seeking to have a particular spiritual path uniquely affirmed will come away completely satisfied. Please keep in mind that this book is not written with any single or particular pagan view in mind. The language in the text may include more Wiccan ideas than, say, Druid or heathens or Thelemic. The truth is that there are more Wiccans in the world, but hopefully practitioners of other pagan faiths will recognise the references and the meanings. My job as an author is to present this information to the widest audience possible, and references that are known to many are likely going to resonate with a wider group of people. At the same time, and it is my hope that in the understanding of each other we may come together to help those of us in need of healing from addiction or other problems to work together and find the healing we seek. In my own experience, I have found the 12 steps to afford one of the most profound spiritual experiences of my life. It's been suggested that all forms of addiction have, at their root, some search for or yearning for a spiritual experience. Our first experience with the substance seems for a moment to offer a glimpse of that experience. But each attempt to repeat or rediscover that fleeting feeling via the substance or activity leaves us further frustrated. For some people, an obsessive tendency follows, and they are unable to let go or detangle or disentangle from that cycle of using. and an inevitable emotional letdown follows. At times, this spiritual, physical, and emotional disorder can take on such proportions that it leads to legal problems such as OUI charges, loss of driving privileges, or even jail time. It can result in suicide or worse. The knowledge that while under the influence, we may have taken the life of another person, perhaps while driving and intoxicated. It is at this point, though, where a person is now able to seek in earnest that which will truly fulfill them. In working through our problems with the 12 steps, we are engaged in a journey of self-discovery that quite strangely takes us toward what we are seeking when we first took up whatever substance or activity it is that we used. It's an irony that we find, emerging from the jungle of addiction, exactly what it was that led us into that dark and potentially deadly wilderness in the first place. This concludes this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Dee's story. I know I learned so much from her. Support me on Patreon at patreon.com/thecultvault for exclusive monthly content, or get in touch at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this is The Cult Vault.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.